Hey everyone, welcome to Non-Casual Poly. I'm Tharo. I wanted to have a discussion, as per the title, about polyamory and anxious attachment. I think for a lot of people, when they hear what anxious attachment is, which is, a preoccupation with the person that you're with or the multiple people that you're with, and a fear of abandonment being put through it, many would consider anxious attachment people to be out of sync with polyamory, that it's actually very difficult for them, because if your partner is with multiple people, then how can you stop yourself from feeling jealous? Wouldn't that increase your anxiety? Wouldn't that make you feel like the world is ending and that your levels of quote unquote cleanness would be through the roof? Well, here's the thing. I don't think the relationship structure actually dictates whether something is doable or not. So, for example, first and foremost, each relationship that you'll have in your life will either put you on the avoidant part or on the anxious part. So it's not like you just have anxious attachment and then done. Just depending on the relationship that you have, like if you look at your connection with your parents or your friends, they'll all look a bit different and will all lead one way anxious or one way avoidant or secure if, things are going good. But in general, most people would, I feel like I've heard a lot of rumblings of people thinking that people who are anxious attachment are completely unable to be in a polyamorous relationship, and it's actually more for avoidance. So there was a kind of trend of people thinking that, well, a lot of the people that you're going to meet with polyamory are going to be avoidant type of people. And look, here's the thing. It might seem that way, especially in the dating market, but that's because people who are avoidant are less willing to commit, and therefore probably are generally more in the dating scene than the anxious people. The anxious people are either, not with someone, or they're anxious about someone, or they're already in a relationship, but not with the willingness to stick it through and be in it and be committed in it. Anxious attachment people tend to have a proclivity to value deep connections, tend to have a proclivity to appreciate some level of consistency within a connection. So commitment, they're not really commitment phobic. They require more reassurance about the level of commitment that they believe they deserve. Now, things that would spark fears of abandonment and stuff like that, especially having multiple partners. I think that's just consistent throughout any attachment style, whether you're avoidant or fearful avoidant or anxious attachment, having to deal with more than one person, and the jealousy that could potentially come from that can be difficult, can be something that the person has to end up dealing with. But regardless of that, you can experience jealousy when you're in a monogamous relationship. You might just notice like a friend that your partner is hanging out with a bunch, and you might just feel jealous. It's not like you can't feel jealous in a monogamous relationship. So, since jealousy is able to be felt in a monogamous relationship, it really calls into question what would be particularly different about someone having an anxious attachment versus a more avoidant attachment or secure attachment. Would polyamory actually change anything? And I don't think that's the case. I think all of the problems, that come with polyamory, any relationship style comes with its own problems. Monogamy, polyamory, the whole lot. And polyamory just has its own distinct problems that come with it, there are certain ways in which jealousy can show up and what you have to manage and all that stuff. But one of the good things about people who do lean anxious is that they tend to really value getting close with their partner. Just as a baseline, they value that. And their method of, checking if the connection is secure is to talk about things, is to discuss things, is to move towards and get reassurance from their partner. And this need for depth and reassurance allows for them to generally create a lot of deep and meaningful connections in their life. Because that's what they're naturally kind of drawn towards. That's what they value. It's a value judgment, really. But also, like, it's how their nervous system is activating. So, like, if you look into yourself and you see that you have the capacity to not just form multiple relationships, but you have the capacity to form multiple deep connections. You feel like you have the time, you feel like you can put in the effort, you feel like it's possible for you, and you value that, then polyamory is definitely a thing that you can engage in, as long as you do the work to get over. I shouldn't say get over, because jealousy is just a thing that arises. To form a relationship with your own jealousy, as long as you're willing to do that. Being able to be with multiple partners means the potential to make multiple deep connections, which is a desire that a lot of people with anxious attachment want. It's a genuine desire for them. They might be kind of disappointed in maybe like some of the relationships they've been in. They might be, I know I tend to lean this way. So like, you might have been disappointed by like friendships, being like, well, these friendships aren't as deep as I want them to be, but the friends that I have in my life, they're not on that level. They're not on, or there's no desire from them to take it any further. But one of the cool things, at least culturally, or in Western society, or just maybe it's most, I don't know, but in many cultures, is that a relationship itself is synonymous with a certain amount of commitment and a certain amount of emotional depth. And that comes with the packaging. And because of that, being able to have multiple relationships where you can have that depth is actually kind of a godsend, especially if you feel like you have the capacity for it. Because if you really do, and if you truly value having multiple close connections, you might have been someone who's been telling themselves, man, I just really value close connections. Like, that's just what I live for. That's, it's a thing that like, I've always like wanted. It's one of the things I just feel like I had the capacity to do. Polyamory is definitely a gateway, to get that need met, to be able to, look at the time that you have and be like, I want to use this time and I want to spend it forming deep and meaningful connections. Now, obviously, you need to make sure that the people that you end up meeting are willing to reciprocate. You can't just find people who aren't willing to go to the same level as you are. They have to be willing to be going to the similar or same level that you are. Like, you have to be content with it. Otherwise, there's no real point. So one of the things to do would be to signal what you're looking for pretty early on, really, so that people aren't confused. You can't be subtle about your expectations. There might be like a fear that comes up, making you believe that putting yourself out there in that way may lead to rejection. That is one of the core components of having anxious attachment, or if you have that, which is asking for your needs may be difficult because growing up you either didn't feel like you could, or it could just be a personality thing. I mean, we don't really know 100% how all of this anxious attachment stuff comes up. It's still a growing growing science. So, but they have linked it to like childhood and all that stuff. But regardless, advocating for your own needs is going to be very important in order to get what you want and to feel satisfied. If you don't advertise what you want, the kind of relationships that you want, the kind of dynamics that you want, you're not ultimately going to get that thing because you're not pushing it within your life. But also, if there is like a kind of morning that you feel like you've always had of feeling like deep connections should be there or should exist, but they always feel out of reach, like give yourself permission to use polyamory as a way to get that level of depth that you've been craving for. Like that is one of the positives of polyamory, is that the foundation of it is that it is a relationship, and in our culture, relationship is synonymous generally with some level of emotional entwinement and some level of emotional depth, and a connection that is not arbitrary and very much rooted in some level of closeness. Like if you talk to anyone and you have a conversation, and you'll notice that the way they talk about like friendship and the way they talk about relationship is very different. They allow for a lot more time and nuance and energy when it comes to relationships, but when it comes to friendships, the general expectation is one of a bit of a looseness to it. And hey, you might not be content with that kind of looseness, that kind of non-deep connection. Not saying, by the way, that you can't have deep friendships, but like the point of this conversation is like polyamory is very is because it is a relationship structure and it's multiple relationships. If you have that desire to have connections that are deep, that feel like they're like pseudo relationships or full-blown relationships, polyamory is an avenue to actually get that need met. And I think that's something that's really special about this relationship structure. I think it's very actually conducive to creating depth, and very much something that anyone with an anxious attachment style can do if they feel like they're congruent with it, right? Like you obviously have to be congruent with the actual structure itself. So all in all, I believe that, if you do have an anxious attachment style and you feel like because of that, it's kind of like a nail in the coffin that you can't or you shouldn't be doing polyamory. I want to tell you that there is actually a lot to benefit from with this relationship structure, and there's a lot of good things that can come your way. If you work on some of the other some of the other problems that can come with polyamory, I think a lot of good can come your way, and you might get your needs met. You might get your emotional needs met. You might be able to find people who actually want to have like difficult conversations. I've seen a number of people with like that lean anxious talking about how they find it frustrating that people don't want to have like a more real conversation. And once again, this is just taking on the anxious point of view. I am not trying to just bash people who are like avoidant or anyone who leans in that direction. This is just to explain to people who are of the anxious variety that polyamory is very much an option for them, and the depth of emotional connection that they might be seeking for or they've been searching for can happen within this structure, and even more could happen for them. There's even more potential for that depth. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that one, and thank you for listening. Okay, bye now, and have a good one. Take care.